Welcome back to another lap guide. I'm ecstatic to say that this week we're at Laguna Seca, which is my home track. It's where I grew up watching racing, it's where I fell in love with the sport, and I've even raced here in real life in a Formula 3 car. I know every nook and cranny of this racetrack, and that knowledge is so important around here because Laguna Seca is a real driver's track. You're constantly either in a corner or about to be in a corner. It takes supreme concentration, and you have to get in a rhythm and be one with the circuit to be fast here. So it would be my honor to take you for a fast lap and show you all the tricks that I know about how to be fast around Laguna Seca. Coming across the line to start our fast lap as we head over the turn 1 crest and begin moving our car towards the right hand side of the circuit, and even use a bit of this extra road on the right hand side of the circuit to set up our braking zone for the double apex Andretti hairpin. For this corner, I'm really focused on carrying lots of speed through the mid corner and getting a good exit, and I'm not as focused on hitting both of the apexes. We're braking hard just at this white line before the 3 board. It's a hard brake to about 80% pressure, and I immediately begin angling the car towards the apex. Braking down into 3rd gear, and as we get to this first apex, you can see I'm already on the throttle, and that's because the rear end of this car is really unstable through the mid corner. So I want to use that throttle to nullify this oversteer and to balance the car. So I carry that throttle all the way into the mid corner, and then right about here, as soon as I can see the second apex, I start getting hard back to throttle. Only to about 80% throttle though, because the car will get loose on the exit. So 80% throttle, a little kick of oversteer as we get to full throttle, using all of the road on the right, and immediately hustling the car back to the left to set up this medium speed right-hander. The car always wants to understeer through this corner. So we use a little bit of trail brake to help bring the nose in towards the apex, and then we're hard on the throttle as soon as we hit that apex. We begin turning in, lifting off, and just dabbing the brakes right after this dark patch on the curbing in front of us. So we turn in and just dab the brakes to bring the nose in towards the apex. It's a late downshift into 3rd gear, and I'm immediately back hard on the throttle as soon as we hit that first apex, which is just after that red curve, into 4th gear, keeping the car on the left-hand side of the circuit because we're setting up a really fast right-hander. We're turning in and slowly peeling off the throttle just after this 2 board in front of us. Peeling off to about 50%, and we're aiming to apex just after this red curve in front of us. Before we hit that apex though, we are hard back on the throttle in 5th gear, trying to get a really good exit. Coming in to a fast uphill left-hander. The car has a ton of grip on entry, but you lose a bit of that grip as you get towards the exit, which means we have to get on the throttle a little bit later than we might expect. But it's a hard but quick brake just after this white line in front of us, down into 4th gear. Immediately you can see that I'm back on the throttle, trying to maintain our momentum through the mid-corner. And as we get to about here, which I consider the apex, we're hard on the throttle again, a little bit of understeer on the exit, but we are clean through that corner as well, into 5th gear, setting up what I think is the most challenging corner on the circuit. That's because it's not only a very fast, blind apex left-hander, but this car also really wants to oversteer on entry. So I hope you're a left foot braker, because how I take this corner is I lift off to about 20% throttle and just dab the brakes while holding the throttle about 20%, and then immediately begin feeding the throttle back in as we get towards the apex. So just before the 2 board, I lift off, initiate turn in, and just dab the brakes. As you can see, about 20% throttle and a little bit less than that on the brakes, just to bring the nose in towards the apex and holding the throttle to balance the rear of the car. As we get towards the apex, I start feeding more throttle back in, and as we hit this apex, I'm hard on the throttle, using a lot of that road on the right, but not dipping our wheels into the dirt, and we are heading into the most notorious corner on the entire circuit, the corkscrew. But just like any other corner, as long as you have the right references and the right inputs, you can take this corner not only quickly, but also consistently. So I set up this corner by first using this curbing on the left-hand side. I begin slightly turning to the right just after this white line on our left. And I begin braking just before this white line on our right. It's a hard initial brake, but I immediately peel off because we're coming over a crest and losing grip. But as soon as we're over that crest, I begin braking hard again, and we can see now the first apex of the corkscrew in front of us. I begin turning in towards that apex, drop it down into 2nd gear, and as you can see, as I get to this apex, I'm applying a little bit of throttle to again just help balance the rear of the car. But what's most important when we get to this first apex is you begin looking at this weird Z-shaped tree in front of us. because this tree is our guide to the corkscrew. So after this first apex, I'm aiming to align my nose with this tree. And as soon as my nose is aligned with this tree, that's my cue to start turning right into the second apex. So we pass this first apex, I'm hard on the throttle in second gear, pointing my nose towards this tree. And as soon as my nose is pointed towards that tree, I begin turning right and I upshift into third gear. And just like that, magically, the apex falls underneath our right-hand side tire, using about 75% of the road on the left, immediately hustling the car back towards the right to set up Rainy Curve. It's a really fast left-hander. In the first few laps you take it, you will have to lift through here, but we are well into the stint, so we can take this easily flat. We're keeping the car wide on entry, and then moving it back towards this apex. Fourth gear, fifth gear, missing that curb on the exit because that curb can be really dangerous. Hustling the car back to the left-hand side of the circuit to set up a really fast right-hander. We're just dabbing the brakes right after the two-board in front of us, getting immediately back to throttle to help keep up our momentum through the mid-corner, and then we're hard on the throttle as we hit the apex. So just a dab of the brakes right after that two-board, down into fourth gear, a little bit of throttle to keep up our speed, and then hard on the throttle at the apex. This exit curb is really tricky. We're just tapping it. It can really easily pull you off the track though if you use too much of it. Fifth gear, setting up the final corner of the lap. Unfortunately, this lap guide is almost over. We're braking hard just before this two-board in front of us. Down into second gear. I like to kiss my right front tire just on that red curb in front of us. And then hard on the throttle through the exit. Second gear, third gear, a little kick of oversteer. We lose a bit of momentum as we come across the line to set a 121.3. I absolutely love lapping around Laguna Seca. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this guide was helpful. I hope you have a great week of racing. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate all the support, and I will see you guys next time.